Spiritual bypassing is one of the biggest problems within personal mastery and spirituality today, leaving many people stuck within their awakening process. Bypassing is so common that most of us have done it at some point within our lives. I certainly have. Yet spiritual bypassing can create major problems within your awakening process and limit your levels of awareness and quality of life. Your days of spiritual bypassing will be over after today's video. And you're going to learn what is spiritual bypassing? The second thing you're going to learn is why we bypass in the first place. The third thing you're going to learn are the signs of spiritual bypassing, so you can spot it within yourself if and when you do it. And the final part to today's video, we're going to cover 5 powerful techniques to help you stop bypassing once and for all. If you're new to my videos, please click the subscribe button and click the bell. That way you'll be notified each and every week when I release new content. So when you've done that, let's dive straight in. I'm Richard Hussaini, coach, speaker, and here to support you along your path to personal mastery. And personal mastery being the path of inner work for outer action in life. On to part 1 of today's video. What is spiritual bypassing? The term spiritual bypass or spiritual bypassing was first termed in the 1980s by John Welwood, who was a Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist. And the key definition is really a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. To simplify that, it's really about when we use language and practices to deflect the inner work, because most of the time the inner work is uncomfortable and often painful. And quite often it's hard to spot when we're bypassing. And so an example of bypassing is if you've told yourself when you're feeling a certain emotion, whether that's anger or resentment or fear, that you're just saying words, oh, it's okay, I'm in present moment, I'm feeling great. Or you're hearing people talk about high vibes, stay in your high vibe, keep your vibes high. We don't accept low vibes in this room, maybe in a yoga class or in a certain practice. It's about using language to deflect from what you're actually feeling within your body. So put it into one sentence, it's about avoiding negativity, any negativity in your life whatsoever. We're just focusing on the positivity and trying to shut out all negativity. But surely as a fully integrated spiritual being, we're supposed to be feeling both positive and negative. We're supposed to be feeling and using those experiences to help us grow in our life. There's no doubt it's a very tempting path to bypass those negative feelings. But as long as we do that, it's going to leave us in a limited place. On to part 2 of today's video. Why we bypass in the first place, and we're going to cover 2 main reasons. If you spent any amount of time watching our videos, you'll know that energy work is a key component to personal mastery. It's one of the key foundational layers to understanding ourselves on a deeper level. And so spiritual bypassing from an energetic perspective is really about fragmentation or disassociation. It's when we're unwilling to look at those parts of us that are uncomfortable, the hidden parts or the subconscious parts. When this happens, we almost always feel like 2 separate people. There are 2 kind of sides to us, because there's a part of us that we're fully conscious of and there's a part of us that we're unconscious of. And the path, the inner work, the path to personal mastery is about gently uncovering more and more of those unconscious layers. And it's crucial to say and to highlight that every time we bypass, every time we avoid looking at negative or the painful areas or the uncomfortable patterns that we notice, we're strengthening those deeper parts of us. We're strengthening those shadows, we're strengthening that unconscious realm. We're just reaffirming it because we're pushing it further and further down. So in a way you could say that that's becoming heavier, those sides of us are becoming heavier, which are limiting our ability to ascend energetically. And whether it resonates with you or not, it doesn't matter how much positive self-talk we can give ourselves. If we're not addressing the shadows, we're going to continually be weighed down by those negative sides of us until we accept that we have to look at them. On to part 3 of today's video. Signs of spiritual bypassing so you can spot them within yourself. The first one to be aware of is when you're being overly positive, and really this is a fundamental method of spiritual bypassing. When you try and see overly positive things and you don't recognize the true sense or the true feeling that you're experiencing in the moment. We polarize into the light, so into what's good and what's light and how great I feel and how high my vibe is, and we're completely ignoring those darker, deeper, maybe more uncomfortable sides to us. And when we choose to ignore the negative, which we are choosing, it's a choice, we're leaving behind a huge part of ourselves. We aren't just light or dark, we are light and dark aspects to ourselves, and it's important to recognize that. And so if you overly look at things positively and you're trying to self-talk yourself into, oh, this is fine, I'm peaceful, let's stay in the high vibes, that is a clear sign that you're spiritually bypassing. You're not recognizing the true feelings that's going on within you. A second key sign that you're spiritually bypassing is when you use your sensitivity as an excuse to avoid the uncomfortable. An example of that would be when you sense something that's negative and you'll say, oh no, it's too harsh for me, I'm not going to entertain that dark side, I have to stay in light, I have to stay up, I have to stay upbeat, I have to stay positive. All that kind of avoidance talk is about avoiding, over-relying on the sensitivity. But staying and hiding behind it over sensitivity is just keeping us trapped. It's just going to keep you trapped within those layers that you're allowing to be seen. Any layers that we're not going to recognize is going to hold us back. And again, like I said at the beginning, it's going to help us or keep us weighed down and avoid and stop us from ascending. The third sign that you're spiritually bypassing is when you avoid your very human being. And what I mean by that is when you are accepting of certain emotions and certain feelings and rejecting other emotions. And so this is a big one for me, and this is one that I have to work through. So an example of that would be, it's okay to feel certain positive emotions. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm grateful. But when I feel things like anger, I assign shame to that. That's not good to feel anger, for example. But anger is a sign. Anger is a very real emotion. Our bodies are capable of producing anger. And again, like I said before, if you continue to reject the anger or repress the anger, it will stay within your body, in your emotional side, in your energetic side, and it continue to keep you limited. Anger, shame, fear, resentment, and all the rest of them serve a huge purpose. And so they're just as important as positive emotions. You can't have one without the other. You have to. And I would argue that the negative emotions, the anger, the resentment, and all of those are even more important because they're showing us where we're trapped. They're showing us where we're stuck. All emotions are what make us human, and it's important to remember that. And one of my favorite teachers, Muji, in fact, multiple enlightened beings have said this in the sense of, I think, and I've fallen into this trap where, I shouldn't be feeling anger, I shouldn't be feeling guilt, I shouldn't be feeling this. When really emotions are just like the weather, they come and they go. Our mind is still, our mind is the same, but thoughts will come and go. And it only becomes a problem when we assign onto those thoughts. So if we jump onto shame and we keep holding onto it, or we try and avoid it, we push it away, that's when it becomes a problem. But just to be, and this is a skill to train, and this is where meditation comes in, it's about feeling it and seeing it and allowing it to pass through. So as I said, all emotions are part of our human experience. Another sign that you're spiritually bypassing is when you project your triggers. And this is a really big one, I think, for most, is where when you're getting triggered in the moment, you slip into victimhood and you begin to blame. Or you become a rescuer, you help rescue someone. But ultimately within your own experience, you are the victim. You become the victim and you start to blame other people for what's happening to you, rather than using that situation for you. It's happening for you to help you liberate yourself. Now, I've done a video on this before featuring Gabor Mate, which you can find the link below, which goes into depth regarding emotional triggers and how to diffuse them. The fundamental aspect of triggers is when we avoid the wounds and just focus on the trigger, and the trigger being, it could potentially be someone, it could be something, a situation. If we focus on what has happened rather than be curious about, well, why is that happening within me, that's where we get stuck, and that's an example of spiritual bypassing. And the final sign of spiritual bypassing that cover today is about where we hide behind veneers or personas that we portray to the outside world. And a classic example is on social media. We may be feeling sad or unhappy or angry, yet we post a video that shows us, or a picture that shows us happy, living our #best life. That is a true example where our inner world doesn't match our outer world. And so we're not being true to ourselves and we're not being true to the people who we're posting to. Fundamentally, when you hide behind your personas or your veneers, you're delaying your healing process because you're not being authentic to yourself more than anyone else at all. It doesn't really matter about anyone else. Your authentic voice is being hidden and being suppressed because you're trying to portray something that's not matching your inner world. On to the final part of today's video, part 4, 5 powerful techniques to help you avoid spiritual bypassing once and for all. So the first and most obvious point is to say you have to do the work. Doing the work is the only way really that you're going to strip away the layers of ourselves that are holding us back and that are limiting us. Every time you bypass, you're just making that part of you that you're trying to suppress and trying to hide bigger and stronger. There's no way around it. So just remember that every time you bypass, you're making that side of you stronger. And the bigger you make your unconscious or your shadow, the more time it's going to take you to heal, and the heavier your energetic layers, the more trapped emotion is going to be within your body, and the longer it's going to take for you to ascend. You're just holding yourself back, literally, energetically. Putting it simply, shadow work is crucial. So make it your friend. Make it part of your life. What's showing up for you right now? Don't go looking for things. You don't need to go looking for it, because it will find you. And when it does find you, when you do get a trigger within your life, there is something right there to work on. Be curious with it. Why is it coming up? The next thing to look at is about coming into your power, changing your perspective, moving away from victim into the coach of your life. So moving away from the drama triangle into the empowerment dynamic. And if you're not sure what that is, I'm going to do a video in the coming weeks on that. It's really about coming from a place of, rather than life happening to you, life is happening for you, for a reason, to help you grow, to help you evolve as a spiritual being. You can face anything at any time, know that for sure. We are eternal beings, eternal souls, and we are so much more powerful than we really realize at times. And now is a time to step into that power, to really fully feel and fully to step in who we really are. The next tip is just to embrace humanity. We are not perfect. We need to embrace every single aspect of ourselves, including that shadow, and to welcome it in, to accept it, to welcome it in with open arms, and to know that it's part of us, and that's okay. It's all right to feel the negativity. It's all right to feel the things that are uncomfortable, because that is part of us and we're designed to experience it. And the final tip to avoid spiritual bypassing is to work with your triggers. I've touched on it a little bit in this video, but the idea that when something is coming up for you, something uncomfortable, some reaction to someone or something, that is something to work with. That is food for thought. That is the ammunition. That is the gunpowder, as Gabor Mate says, with regards to that's the explosive thing or moment within us that we need to look at and liberate. A trigger, if you think about the trigger, and this is directly from Gabor Mate, a trigger references a weaponry, doesn't it? And so a trigger is a very small thing. It's a very small moment. Yet there's a whole mechanism in place, the rifle and the barrel and the gunpowder and the ammunition that causes the explosive reaction. And so we hold all of that within ourselves, and that's in us for a reason. Now that's probably linked back to childhood, again taking that from Gabor Mate. And so work with that. What's come up? Be curious. So an example would be in my own life right now, and I'm very grateful to have my life partner Anna, and so we've made a commitment to each other to be able to help ourselves liberate from our own wounds and our triggers. Now the first thing to honor is that genuine feeling, right? I feel anger, I feel resentment, I feel this. And so to see it, okay, that's interesting, why has this come up? And to be open enough to say, this is what I feel. And one of the things we use, and we've taken this from Brené Brown, is to lead with that is the story I'm telling myself is, whatever the story is that we're starting to formulate within our mind to suit that feeling within our body. And so if it's shame, if it's about being left, is about being vulnerable or not being worthwhile or fill in the gap, there are so many different things, we express that. And so to express that forms a dialogue, and not for the other person to rescue, but to start to close the loop on what's happened. Be curious with it. Okay, well, why do I feel that? What's happened? Can I track that back? And even if you can't track that back, then if it's a worthiness, an unworthiness, then that's something you can work on. That's something that you can begin to work on within yourself. When we are triggered, we must understand that they are the wounds that are within us that need healing. And just simply put, you're not triggered until something needs healing. And that's why there's no need to go looking, because it will come up time and time again. I believe you, and you know that as well, like within your life, when you were last triggered, maybe it was today, maybe it was this week at some point. The reason you've been triggered is because now is the time that needs to be healed. Triggers point you to the wounds that need your attention. Spiritual bypassing is so common that most of us have done it, and simply being because we're unaware that we're doing it. So I hope this video is giving you some things to focus on and to really dive into yourself. So over to you now. How has this resonated, landed for you? What's resonated? What has helped? What has kind of sounded familiar and has kind of given you a tap on the back to say, now's the time to look at that moment? I'd love to hear. Please comment below. Thank you as always for joining me and watching this video. And a reminder, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe so you'll be notified each and every week when I release new content. Just a reminder as well that there's an Ask Richard section now. So if you have any question on social media, just make sure you put hashtag Ask Richard. And I'm going to begin a series of just answering those questions out. There'll be short clips to answer your questions, just to connect with you on a deeper level. So thank you again for joining me, and see you on another episode.